Hi, everybody, and welcome once again to Story Hour. I'm your host, Daniel Marcus. My fabulous co-host is Laura Blackwell, and I hope that you're all healthy and safe and taking care of yourselves and taking care of each other. We started Story Hour early in the pandemic, very early in lockdown times in 2020. My intention with starting Story Hour was just creating a space where my writer friends and I could come and share our work with each other. And Laura joined as a co-host shortly thereafter, and it just grew way beyond our initial expectations. We've had over 200 writers through these rooms in the last 3 years. We have been here every Wednesday, except for the week between Christmas and New Year's. And it's just been an incredible joy and privilege to be able to have a space for our amazing writers to come and share their work and to share it with you folks out there who are listening. So thank you for joining us once again. The way this works is, I think it's probably the oldest form of entertainment, which is folks sitting around the fire telling lies to each other. And countless millennia later, here we are, and we're basically doing the same thing. So every week we have two authors, about 30 minutes each, a little less because there's me uh, chatting. And we do exactly that. So tonight we are really delighted to have Cynthia Gómez and Kate Heartfield. Um, Before we get to the meat of the program, I really want to announce with gratitude that we've received for 2023 a Sifway Givers Grant that helps us to continue to basically keep the lights on, keep the virtual rooms open, keep our website open, and so that we can continue to bring all of you what we really believe is some of the best spoken word speculative fiction you can get anywhere. We've applied for a grant for next year. I think we'll probably get it. I certainly hope we do. So it's our custom to ask our authors to indicate a worthy cause for us to call your attention to. If you're in a position to help financially, that's great. Do so. Otherwise, just be aware. And if you're so inclined, spread the word. So Cynthia Gómez is reading tonight for accessrj.org. That's Access Reproductive Justice. Currently celebrating 30 years of fighting for reproductive justice and expanding reproductive health care access in California. Among the services they provide are abortion and healthcare resources, legal and policy resources, fundraising and action toolkits, and the latest in reproductive justice news. So that's accessrj.org. Check them out. And if you can contribute, please do so. Kate Heartfield is reading tonight for Doctors Without Borders. And this is an organization we've all heard of. They provide impartial, independent, medical humanitarian access to the people who need it most notably folks who are affected by conflict, by disease, by natural and human-made disasters, and by exclusion from healthcare. And they are a presence in over 70 countries. That's Doctors Without Borders, doctorswithoutborders.org. We're going to start the program tonight with Kate Heartfield, who is a Story Hour repeat offender. We were trying to figure it out before the program started. We think it may be her third appearance at Story Hour. So Kate, we're really happy to have you back. Welcome. Kate's latest novel is The Valkyrie. This is a retelling of old legends. Her 2022 novel, The Embroidered Book, won Canada's Aurora Award, as did her debut novel, which was republished in a revised edition as The Chatelaine in 2023. She also writes Assassin's Creed novels and interactive fiction, including The Road to Canterbury 2018, The Magician's Workshop 2019, from Choice of Games. Her fiction's been shortlisted for the World Fantasy, Nebula, Locus, Aurora, Sunburst, Crawford Awards, as well as the Ottawa Book Award and her journalism for a National Newspaper Award. Kate grew up in Manitoba and now lives at the rural edge of Ottawa. Kate, the floor is yours. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. Oh my goodness, Laura just reminded me it's actually my fourth appearance. I didn't even remember that. It's amazing. The time has flown by. So thank you so much for continuing to do this wonderful project. It's amazing, and I've loved being here, and I've loved watching all the other readers. So before I get into mine, this time I'm reading two stories that are on the darkest end of the spectrum for me, which is not super dark. I tend not to write outright horror, but it's pretty dark fantasy and slipstream kind of stuff. So just a content warning. Both of the stories that I'm going to read tonight deal with death. The first one that I'm going to read also includes imprisonment and abduction of children, and a brief mention of child marriage. So if that's something that you don't want to deal with tonight, please go away and come back when Cynthia's reading. So the first story that I'll read tonight is called I Know All of His Names, which was published in Liminal Stories in 2017. And I'm actually going to put the link in the chat for anyone who wants to see that. And it is a story that sort of mashes up one of my favorite fairy tales and the true story of the 16th century Countess of Blood, for those of you who are familiar with Bathory's story. So it's a little bit on the dark side. And here we go. Yes, the illustration by A.J. Gabriel is amazing in the Liminal Stories version. So this one is about 15 minutes long, and then I'm going to read a very short one after that, assuming we have time, which I think we will. I know all of his names. I died yesterday. I'm quite sure of it. There came a moment when my heart stalked like a suffocated sparrow in my chest. I could not bear another breath of this heavy air, these walls so close around me. So I stopped bearing it, just like that. I'm still here, though, immured in my castle. The walls built to protect me so I could protect my people. People think of castles like the shells of eggs, protecting only what is within their walls. No, castles are like sheaths. They keep the weapons sharp. Souls linger long after bodies go cold. In the old days, whenever I killed, I would feel the soul still there in the room with me, looking over my shoulder at the bloodied body. So I'm not surprised that my soul has not yet left this prison and made its way down to where I know it must travel. I watch the evening meal push through the slit in the bricks on one side of my rooms. I watch the morning meal come in after it. They never bother with knives or plates or anything that might draw blood for me. They are afraid of me. Me, an old woman. Afraid of this rusted armor they forged to keep their softness safe, then discarded when the fashions changed. My bite kept the slavering kings of 6 neighboring nations at bay. My bloodthirst kept the nation's babies fed. My people are like an archer, chary of his own bowstring, cringing as he draws. Don't they know I am theirs entirely? How fickle my subjects are. They liked me bloody once upon a time. They liked me just fine. Now they handle me as if I were a hound in dotage, liable to bite the hand that feeds. Through the gap they push trenchers of brown bread with watery fish or beans slathered on top. Everything I eat has to be thin enough to get through the slot. I let the meals that come after my death lie on the stone floor, my gift to the flies. That and my old woman's body, thin though it might be. 2 meals, a full day. My soul is still here. Hey, I shout. No answer, insolent bastard. My soul wriggles into my limp body and crawls to the brick wall where once there was a door. I put my face to the slot. It is only the height from my chin to my top lip. Hey, I shout again. I'm dead, you know. The voice of my jailer is slow in coming. No, Countess, he says. You're not. Bah, shows what you know, I say. What's your name? He says nothing. They never do answer that question, these boys sent to guard me, sent to make sure I don't get out. Perhaps they're afraid I'll use their names in witchcraft. People tell all sorts of stories about me, I am sure. Every story needs a monster, and I make a very serviceable one. They say, now, I killed out of vanity. They find it expedient to forget that I learned from my husband. Their thick-necked murderous bulwark. Women's crimes are individual. They die with the woman, and the state cannot be blamed. Let them say it was vanity. All is vanity, and my spirit is vexed no more. My body is tired, though, so I drag it back into my cell and look out into the murk through my own eyes. Perhaps I'm not dead after all. It's so hard to tell the difference. here in the dark. How can I tell if I'm dead? I ask out loud, looking the boy outside can hear me well enough. You won't even let me have a mirror. They don't answer me, so I puzzle over it for a while. It's possible, perhaps, that I am still alive. I can't feel life in myself alone. I haven't been able to for many years. The only life I have known to be real, since I was very young, was the life I cut out of other people. There is someone who can come and have a look at me, and give me his opinion. Perhaps he can even give me what I told him to fetch me months ago. If he'd done his duty, I would be alive for certain now, and not alone. I turn my face to the wall. The stone is as cold and gritty against my cheek as a beach lapped by the sea, and it smells like a cave. This is an old castle. My husband's castle, once upon a time. Mine now. It is my prison, yes, but it belongs to me, and so does its spirit. I open my mouth against the cold stone. It tastes like gold in my mouth, like true ducats, my faithful castle. The sound of the R pushes my lips flat against the stone until I kiss it with a rump, and I flick my tongue with the L and breathe upon it with the stilt, and finally press my teeth to the wall, curling my upper lip in a sneer and say, skin. Oh, I know all of his names. The walls whispered them to me after I had been here for some months, and I had grown weary of scratching the days on the stone, of engraving filthy messages for my cowardly offspring to find on the day my corpse begins to stink. The walls took pity on me. I am one with the walls now, after all. I am immured. These whispering walls told me his names in all the languages I know, which are many, for I was well educated. Some days I summon him in Hungarian, some in Latin. But today I am feeling German. It has something to do with being dead, probably. My mood is philosophical. Rumpelstiltskin takes his time to appear. The little golden flecks in the stones glitter. Shadows deepen. There, the curve of his pointed chin. Aha! The flop of his cap. A crack shivers the line of his bent back. He is hard-working, I will give him that. The little man shrugs his way down out of the wall, leaving no gap or impression behind. His skin is gray, but not like stone. Rather like the hue of a body after it's been lying for a few days. Here I am, he grumbles. I'm dead, I say. Don't you agree? In a sense, I suppose. I wonder which other castles he frequents. What other masters and mistresses he serves. He told me once that it's not only my castle spirit, but the spirit of all castles, and can be summoned in any of them at any time. He's made of distrust and horsehair mortar, mainly. No, not in a sense, I tell him. I mean, I really am dead. I'm not breathing. I can't feel my heart beat. He steps forward, sniffing. I kneel and let him examine me. I pull my matted hair away from his face so he can see. He leans his large ear towards my breasts, listening, his pallid skin close to mine. You are still breathing, Countess, he says. Are you sure? He nods. Are you disappointed? I consider. I suppose it is one more day without giving them the satisfaction. They let me keep my clothing, hoping I hang myself, I know. So for that reason, I am pleased to be alive. Good, then, Rumpelstiltskin says, stepping back. I'll be going, if you'll oblige. He wants me to say his name. To send him back into the rock, back where he goes when no one has need of him. I shake my head. Not yet. Tell me, how is your search proceeding? Have you found a baby girl for me? His eyebrows come together like two fox kits fighting over milk. The last one slipped through my fingers, I'm afraid. Slipped? How? A baby's not slippery. This is the third one you have lost. Tell me what you're doing, and I'll tell you where you're going wrong. It's such an easy task I have set him. I do not even require that the baby have blue eyes, as my Anastasia did, or a fine head of dark hair, as she did. Her hair was still wet from birthing when my husband took her from me, handed her to some nurse whose name I never learned. By the time I had borne him 4 more children, reopening the 4 times the wound stitched together when I was a girl, I had stopped asking him questions. I want a baby, I tell Rumpelstiltskin, slowly, to get the message through his stony pate. I promise I won't hurt it. I've done with all that. I swear on the cross, I only want a baby of my own. To love, to share my cell with me, to give me life. The little man nods, pandering. I tried. I truly did. I made a bargain. Bargain? What bargain? Foolishness. If you want a baby, you take it. I wanted no investigation, madam. I thought that best. Investigation? Bah, let them try to pin anything on me here in my prison. You are a bad liar. The truth is, you've not got the strength for my business. You crumble at the slightest touch. And what happened? Did the baby not keep its end of the bargain? Not the baby, the mother. But she did keep it. She guessed my name, one of my names. Oh, God's blood. I suppose her walls must whisper too. Well, that is a stroke of bad luck. He nods again, strangely eager. He thinks he's getting away with something. What does he know about babies and mothering, this little man of rock? You ridiculous creature. Gone soft inside, haven't you? Some protector spirit you are. You must do my bidding. Isn't that true? I commanded you by your name. If I ask you for a baby you will provide. Yes, madam. I am bound. I must do your bidding, and I have been working toward that end. He looks at me as though I am the worst thing he's ever seen. Working at cross purposes with yourself, if you ask me. Soon, he creaks. I promise. I cannot fail. No, he cannot fail, can he? I do not think he has it in him to fail. He's made of rock and moves through rock, this defender I have called into my service. But he can hinder me, just as my own castle hinders me. He'll drag the task out until I'm dead, the infuriating creature. Perhaps I truly am dead already, and he's afraid to tell me. Still as stone, mocking me from his shadows. I can barely see the shape of him in this evil light. Come closer, I say. He takes a step. Closer still, I command. He shuffles forward on his little pearl-toed shoes. I beckon him with one finger as if he were a child. He sighs like a portcullis groaning shut and crawls into my lap. He has done this for me before. Sometimes I have to remind him where his fealty lies. Like my people who cheered my savagery when it suited them, then shut me up like a rabid dog when it didn't. Sometimes he forgets. He's heavier than he looks, and I have to shift my legs a bit to get comfortable. His shoes, reddish-gray like granite, hang off my right thigh, and his head lolls on my left. His position is such that if he chose, he could turn his face up toward mine, as if in expectation of the breast, but he turns his face to the wall. I gather him in my arms and begin to rock back and forth. My child, my own cold child. Rumpelstiltskin was right. I am still alive after all. I feel it now. I run my finger down his cheek and scrape away a bit of lichen. His eyes are open, staring. Please, he says after a time, when the evening meal has splattered in through one slot and the sunlight has dimmed in the other, and we are in utter darkness. Please say my name. I shake my head. Not just yet, little man. You will stay a little longer here with me. And that's the end of I Know All of His Names. That's one where I still have to apologize for the contents of my mind, but it's a weird one. And I'll read one more short one. So this one is called The Investigation is Sealed. And it's actually inspired by the Westray mine disaster that happened here in 1992 in Canada, which was a very tragic and infuriating death of many miners and corporate malfeasance that followed. So this is about an alchemist who goes in to investigate a mine, and this story has not actually been published yet, so maybe it will be. We shall see, but in the meantime, I will read it for the first time here. So the investigation is sealed. The dragger flowed into the mine shaft like thin, pale honey. At the entrance, the chief alchemical investigator supervised the application, though his job was mostly done. He'd made the stuff. He'd poured it onto the ground just inside the blown-apart doors. There was little to do now but watch it grow, from a pint to many gallons, feeding on disaster. What happens next? Asked the chief of police, standing and watching in the way men in uniform stand and watch. Stand well back, please. Once it reaches the end, I can take a sample and analyze the changes. And it'll tell you what happened, whether there's... The chief and alchemical investigator breathed in rotten, burnt air. There was no way any miners within would be alive. He needed no potion to tell him that, though the Drager was, as always, eager to tell him. It was a powerful potion, and it spoke to its maker. When he squatted casually and dampened his fingers, he saw flashes of what the Drager found. Shining and clear it flowed, with canary yellow glints near the doors where the weak morning sun hit. It dampened the layer of coal dust that lay unburned near the entrance, the remnants of the stuff that had acted like gunpowder when the coal seam breathed methane onto some unknown spark. The golden liquid flowed an inch deep, in the opposite direction from that the fireball had taken. It flowed past twisted equipment, seeping into a charred body trapped beneath it, the body of a man who told his supervisor about dangerous amounts of coal dust. Any investigating potion can tell us a lot, said the chief alchemical investigator, standing up again, resisting the urge to wipe his wet fingertips on his pants. Drager absorbs truth, the way that aniline absorbs pain, or the way that Elginbar absorbs pressure, or the way some alchemists thought that Mirasol would absorb energy. The truth of what happened here, it'll be in the Drager. Footsteps behind them, and they turned to see the chief executive officer in a dark suit. She gave them a professional nod of acknowledgement. They were all in this together. Government, police, the company, the mining alchemists, and the town full of miners and their families who needed work to live just as everyone did. This was not an economy that could weather a corporate collapse. We are all eager to get to the bottom of this, said the chief executive officer. It's such a privilege to be a part of a company that's not afraid of the truth. There's a reason there has never been a prosecution at any of our mines. The chief alchemical investigator agreed that was true. His fingertips stung. The ground shuddered, and the police officers standing at a safe distance behind the barrier looked nervous. But this was no explosion. What they felt was the Drager reaching the end of the mine. When it could flow no further, it deepened, 2 inches thick, then 3, covering the bodies that lay scattered, and the ones under the rock fall, and the ones that were no longer whole. It learned their names and stories as it filled their open mouths and glazed their staring eyes. It filled the mine shafts to the top. It drowned the wrenched tracks and blackened signs. And when it had filled the mine, it hardened like amber and darkened like blood. At the broken threshold, there was now a wall, nearly as opaque as dirt. It knew how and why every one of these miners died. It knew about the woman who'd reported the sparking conveyor. It had fed on and absorbed the truth until there was no truth left for anyone to learn. Truth lived now only in the Drager congealing in the air that no longer smelled like death. Now the families in the little houses a mile away could be visited by grief counselors who would pull out the pre-written documents and tell the families of car accidents or heart attacks. Everyone would believe it. The counselors, the police, the world. Everyone but the chief alchemical investigator, whose fingertips still felt damp. He didn't shake the hand of the chief executive officer when she held it out. Excellent work, she said brightly. The whole company would be glad to have it confirmed that the mine was empty. Our employee family can be confident in a safety record that remains unblemished. Another tune locked into the mind of the chief alchemical investigator. This was the only choice he made, to always touch the Drager so that someone would remember. But he kept his silence. He had a little house in another little town with a family in it. He knew his job and his place. He opened his dry lips and said, I pronounce this investigation sealed. And that is the end of my reading for tonight. Thank you very much. So I'll just say again that if you go over to Liminal Stories, which is now on hiatus but still exists on the internet, you can find, I know all of his names and other wonderful stories published there. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Kate. That was lovely. I loved both of those stories. It's our custom, typically, between authors to just pause, breathe, be silent, let the work resonate a bit before shifting gears to the next program participant. So that's what we're going to do. Let's just take a chill moment, a couple of breaths. Kate Heartfield, everybody. Thanks so much, Kate. Our next author is Cynthia Gómez. She is a writer and a researcher. She writes horror and other types of speculative fiction set primarily in Oakland, where she makes her home. Um, Cynthia, you could probably face north, throw a rock, and it might land in my backyard. Um, Her work has appeared in fantasy magazines, Strange Horizons, Tree and Stone, and several anthologies. Her collection, The Nightmare Box and Other Stories, will be out from Cursed Morsels Press in summer 2024. She loves to write dark and frightening things while cuddling with her shadow, aka her adorable little dog. And you can find more of her work at Linktree, that's linktr.ee for the uninitiated, /Cynthia Says Boo. Cynthia, welcome to Story Hour, and take it away.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Reading stories is a great joy of my life. I am only hoping that my adorable little dog doesn't get too restless and insist on, like a cat, being in my lap and then not being in my lap and then being in my lap again. So fingers crossed. So I have two pieces that I'm going to read. And the first was published in 2020. It was my first professional sale. It's called Thread Count. And there should be a link for those who would like to follow along. So, Thread Count. The deaths began slowly, or rather, the dying itself was quick. Bodies dropping onto polished marble, red soaking starched linen, the thudding noises summoning household staff. The limbs were contorted in agonized poses, and the mouths gave off a smell the staff would tell police and reporters that they faltered to adequately describe. It was like rubbing alcohol heated on the stove, or white gardenias left to rot in an untended room. It was that smell, a smell with no name, or too many names, that some would cite when trying to explain why they'd huddled in fear in the doorways or down the hall during their employer's last seconds. But there were also the housemates who wept as they talked of cradling the heads of the dying, pulling a fret pillowcase over their own mouths as they frantically dialed for help. The investigations began as they would have, the extra detectives assigned to untangle the threads of endowments, stocks, bonds, illegitimate children with unsupported inheritance claims, former partners with lawsuits dangling, activists and stalkers rounding out the edges of crowded whiteboards at headquarters. Alibis were offered and confirmed, one detective using a number 2 pencil to mark off each name as he cleared it from the list and flicked open a new page. Nannies and gardeners and house cleaners were questioned, sometimes over and over. White gloves dusted every bottle of Roundup in the garage and every leather cleaner in the stables, of course finding a thicket of fingerprints that proved nothing at all. None of those chemicals were found at the autopsies anyway, and by the time the bodies had been rolled onto steel tables at the coroner's offices, nobody could detect the odor, duly noted in the reports, always identified by the employees who found the bodies, but varying widely as the cases began to dot the map. Floor polish, lighter fluid, rancid sweat. The smell would sometimes return weeks later as the housekeepers emptied desk drawers or shook out heavy curtains, sending them rushing to the safety of their employers' brick-lined patios to gasp in the summer air. That the bodies were dead was plainly obvious, but there was nothing in the prying open of brains or hearts or stomachs, nothing in the meticulous sampling of blood and hair and tissue, nothing in the second or third reports commissioned by grieving families that could explain how they had got that way. What emerged slowly were enough deaths to discern a pattern. From Newport Beach to East Hampton to Breckenridge, reporters camped in front of stone lions announcing yet another death. This one old and infirm, that one young and known for tennis every morning on the back lawn. Another for scaling K2 the year before, live tweeting the journey while a team of Sherpas carried her bags. After all, people die all the time, and it took some time before the accumulation of a critical mass of causes marked in coroner's reports as idiopathic or in detective reports as unknown. It didn't help that so much else was inexplicable. In one family, the patriarch was found floating in his swimming pool, but his wife and children were untouched. In another, the 7 senior members of the family board of directors were all found dead at precisely 10 p.m. on a Friday, scattered across 4 time zones and as many continents. A plane pulled into Kuala Lumpur to find the youngest daughter unresponsive, only minutes after she'd been served her second slow gin fizz. This time, what emitted from her mouth, even as the muscles began to stiffen, was an odor of burnt leather and, even more oddly, crushed lemongrass. The youngest daughter's heirs began to fight over her portion of the empire, a line of shoes and handbags undergoing a rough patch when rumors of Malaysian child labor kept dogging her Instagram feed. It never occurred to them that they might be next. It wasn't until 5 months after the first death, the CEO of a corn and soybean processing giant collapsing in his dressing gown, the smell of sulfur dioxide escaping through the dining room window and alerting his gardeners outside, that anyone realized that's what it had been. It took 2 reporters, one from Forbes and another from Corporate Watch, to independently reach a sober conclusion. While the deceased had a remarkable amount in common, hailing from schools with names like Dartmouth and Dalton and tending to belong to the same few clubs, there was one single thread running through every unexplained death, like a string dangling from a pulled tooth. The Forbes editor told his reporter in no uncertain terms to kill the story, but after ending the call, he gripped his phone, scrolling through the contacts, a list that had grown 3 shorter over the previous 7 months. He began a text message that would serve as a warning, but what would it say? The day after that conversation, the Corporate Watch website laid out its observations in simple, unimpeachable graphic form. While many of the country's wealthiest people were still very much alive, every one of the 11 bodies had appeared on a list of the Fortune 500. And in fact, a chronology of the deaths, although it skipped some entries, leapfrogged its way up the list in perfectly ascending order. Its blogger had chosen that for his title, a warning to those who remained, the Fortune 489. Homicide departments called emergency meetings, reassembled their teams along with FBI agents, dark-suited and flown in on red eyes. Nannies and cooks and assistants were re-summoned for questioning, detectives picking apart their alibis with renewed vigor. An internal email was leaked. Each of its authors insisted that they'd been the victim of hacking, between head actuaries at the country's top 3 life insurance companies, proposing that policies be null and void for anyone on the fortune list. One suggested, out of an abundance of caution, expanding it to the country's top 1% of wealth holders. That furor was eclipsed the following day, when 2 deaths were reported within hours of each other, in still ascending order on what several copy editors dubbed the Fortune 487. The Corporate Watch blogger recruited 3 friends as bodyguards after #TheBloggerDidIt began trending, the bulk of the comments arguing that his piece had been a public hit list for an assassin nobody could name. The nation's top security and risk management company hired 84 new employees in a single day, half of them merely to field the calls and emails that began flooding in 2 minutes after the piece went live. The company's online help chatbots were swiftly removed. After reading endless copies of inquest testimony and detective reports and the articles that clogged Twitter with dizzying speed, the CEO of the largest company had to call back a prospective client who'd left 3 increasingly desperate messages on his personal phone. "So you're telling me you refuse to protect me?" she snapped before his opening sentence was out. His chair creaked as he sat up with a jerk. "Ma'am, what I'm saying is I can't protect you. I can charge you to feel protected, and you may decide that's worth it to you. But there's not one thing in common between all of these crime scenes, not even a common cause of death." "Except no cause at all," he scrawled on a notepad beside him. "Except a mysterious smell that could not be replicated and that was never described the same way twice." One terrified man gave away every bit of his fortune and then sold every piece of real estate he had, down to the last stick of furniture. When the voicemails and then certified letters and finally angry tweets begged him to keep it in the family, he closed his account and scrawled, returned to sender in furious green at the bottom of each envelope. The movers found him collapsed in the foyer of his first home, already plucked and stripped of his possessions, the sunlight bouncing off empty floors, and his body giving off the odor of burning graphite. The magnate's lawyers spent months dispersing and reimbursing the funds he'd shed and the stocks he'd unloaded. He'd begun his fortune in agribusiness, but he was particularly fond of his factories making school supplies. There had been an especially ugly case early in his career. 2 workers had been killed by one of the machines, which had overheated and scalded their faces with steam. He'd been seen weeping at their funerals, and on his death, his family learned that he'd been quietly sending an annuity to the children and grandchildren of both the dead workers. His older daughter cut it off. His 3 children staked out what would emerge as the response patterns of the wealthy, even as the deaths began rolling in faster and forming new lists entirely, expanding to England, Mexico, Hong Kong, Dubai. His youngest followed in her father's recent footsteps, selling off nearly everything. She kept a single silver pendant and 1 matching watch, sloughing off the stocks and trust payments as fast as they rolled in, holed up in a 3-bedroom condo she told herself was safe enough. Her brother's Instagram feed filled up with snaps of him at Lake Como on Bali, precisely the same wide grin in every shot. Both of them were still alive 6 months later, along with the older daughter, who'd taken the reins of the company and hired a firm to fight off a union that had been sniffing around one of the pencil factories. It was these inconsistencies and the glaring gaps and inexplicable branching of the lists that kept earning phrases like capricious twist of fate in news articles, and that spawned multiple watch sites, including one that actually took real bets on who would be next until it went dark one day without warning. An anonymous collective of hackers and internet sleuths published the real names of the bettors, which took up the better part of the news cycle until the collapse of the world's 3rd wealthiest man. He'd collapsed inside his foyer, surrounded by 17 armed guards and 2 assistants, and the taster he'd hired for every single dish. One award-winning columnist for Der Spiegel noted that the deaths had reached 29, every one of them unsolved, and sent out a tweet. If God's not a Marxist, he certainly seems to have done the reading. The 3rd wealthiest man had included in his empire several internationally recognized newspapers. A columnist for one of them, usually on the fashion and lifestyle beat, proposed that instead of joining the coverage of the utter chaos at insurance companies and stock advising firms, the estate and tax attorneys booking 90-hour weeks, the advisors for security and risk management firms quitting in impotent fear, the proliferation of really rich dead people trading cards, the conference of experts poring again and again over autopsy reports, the exhumations of bodies that had long since begun to stink, the utterly indescribable tone of voice from the CEO of the world's largest venture capital firm on their earnings call a week after the deaths of 3 of its 5 principals. That she seek out the very first household employees who'd found the very first body, what one macabre headline had dubbed Billionaire Zero. None of them had ever actually met him, the gardeners explained, perched on rickety metal chairs at a Starbucks. The columnists had only been able to round up 2 of the 4 gardeners who'd been working outside that dining room window in the April sun, and one did most of the talking. Andres had been in the United States for 30 years. His family had left El Salvador when a neighbor recognized his father, Andres Sr.'s distinctive tattoos, marking him as a commander in a squad that had killed untold civilians at the massacre of El Mozote. He hadn't known his father's history until he was much older, Andres Jr. explained, twisting a slim silver cross around and around in his hands, a present from his father at First Communion. I mean, it's just so hard to reconcile that with the man who taught me to ride a bike and bragged to all the neighbors when I graduated high school with honors. Imagine learning that you'd lived for so long with someone who brought on that much suffering. The house you lived in, the food you ate, they came from someone who was carrying all that around inside. The cross dangled from his fingers and gleamed in the waning light. That so much death had been walking beside you all along. And that is thread count. So the next story is very different in tone. I apologize that I forgot to give content warnings for the blood and the death and the darkness of this story. The next, as far as I know, doesn't have any. This was published in Fantasy Magazine earlier this year, and thank you. And this is called The Books Would Like a Word. The books would like a word. I felt them as the sun came through the curtains on a Saturday morning. First, a light papery brush against my shoulder that I could dismiss as the last minutes of a dream. Then a blunt edge digging into my cheek, faintly smelling of my favorite bookstore. I reached for the lamp on the bedside table and smacked my forehead against a stack of blue and green hardcovers piled onto the surface, where my annual reports had been. A slim green volume opened a papery mouth into a grin. We've come with a few complaints. Of course they had. I sidestepped the piles at my feet and stumbled into the kitchen, where I rubbed my eyes, then filled the kettle and settled it on the stove. All that acid in college doesn't seem like such a good idea now, does it? I said to the empty kitchen as I poured coffee grounds into a cone. Well, not empty. The origins of the family, private property of the state, and gender trouble perched on the table along with Black Macho and the Myth of the Superwoman and oddly feminist Ryan Gosling, the only one I'd actually read. Were not acid. This was the bloody chamber, pages rustling and flashing glimpses of the inky marks I'd left everywhere, several readings worth in green ink at various stages of fading. Unlike some of these, with their uncut pages, Angela was well loved. Unlike some of her former neighbors on the shelf, empty spaces for volumes I'd loaned out and kept meaning someday to get back. Well then, what are you? I touched the side of the yellow kettle. It felt as real and warm as on any other day, just as real as the blue hardcover that had smacked me in the forehead a few minutes before. On the counter, a stack of Austen and Bronte and Du Maurier swayed in the faint breeze from the open window, the wind lifting their pages like rustling skirts. We've decided your priorities need some adjusting, Angela said, in a voice I could imagine gleefully reading aloud her first drafts, resolving in the margins, add more blood. My wire fruit basket swayed with paperbacks. What would I see if I opened the fridge? Oranges are not the only fruit. Bread and roses? Stone soup? Got it. Okay. Have you come to show me the entrance into the magical land of Narnia? Nokia, perhaps? The curtains were wide open to the street, where anyone could see me standing in my kitchen having a conversation with the literature. The kettle shrieked. You should get that, Angela said. You'll have a headache if you don't, and that won't get us any closer to our goals. Well, if Angela Carter tells you to make coffee, you make coffee, and you don't forget the cream. It was almost disappointing when it tasted the same as it always had. Next to the mug was my very worn copy of Fledgling. I remembered exactly when I'd first fallen into Octavia's world. A date that stood me up, a stolen afternoon by the lake with weed and a soft yellow blanket nestled under my cheek. Looking up only once the long shadows streaked across the grass, pulling myself away from the adventures of a super-evolved vampire race and a feud out for blood, feeling them all stream away from me like water from soaked hair. I could almost hear them right now, calling me back. But I'd promised to deliver a report by 9:30, so I slid my reaching fingers away from the spine. I saw that. Jesus. Octavia's voice was rich and sonorous and sounded like it was drawing on a lot of patience right now. That's exactly the problem. When was the last time you read any of us? You don't understand. I have a deadline. I have to. Do you ever not have a deadline? There was no way I was going to win this one. So instead, I stood up real casual-like, as if I were just yawning, just stretching, just reaching around the rectangles to the chair where I'd left my laptop last night. There was a tiger on top of it. The paper body was painted in thick orange and black stripes on the cover of a bone-colored volume that I swear looked like it was daring me. Go ahead, try and open up your machine. We've already thought of that. In Angela's voice, I could almost hear the baying of the wolves she summoned onto the page, the red drops pattering onto white snow. I see. So do I want to know what you've done with my phone? Look on top of your fridge. And indeed, What looked suspiciously like my purple phone case lay buried underneath a stack of Borges and Garro. I spun around on my heel, thinking to slip out the front door, but I heard them even before my hand got to the doorknob. The fluttering of a small tree's worth of pages, the spines forming a tall, swaying column that blocked the only way out. As we've said, you don't need to be doing anything other than reading today. This came from my copy of The Picture of Dorian Gray, and I could hear in Oscar's voice the years of gathered dust, the tossing into dozens of cardboard boxes, only to be left sitting quietly on shelf after shelf. Fine. I grabbed the adult coloring book and threw Oscar a pointed look. Be serious. Okay. I pulled out The House on Mango Street from where it dangled in my fruit basket. That's not being serious. Jesus, Oscar. That one hasn't challenged you since you were 12. That's why you picked it, isn't it? But you don't expect me to handle Finnegan's Wake now, do you? You don't even own Finnegan's Wake. So damn literal, dude. If there'd been a set of eyes on his cover, he would have rolled them at me. Look, if you're determined to go for something so light, the disdain came through in waves, then how about one of these wobbles? Those wobbles, of course, were the turquoise and purple piled up around my desk lamp. Diana Gabaldon and Alyssa Cole and what looked like some Courtney Milan. Oscar, can you leave off the sexist disdain for stories primarily read and written by women? As I spoke, I heard a stack of Penguin classics shuffle over next to the bright colors, as if in solidarity. I set Oscar down by the mango book, let him stew there in silence. How about me? This came in a chorus of voices, 3 months to 300 years old, in the accents of Kingston and Lima and London and New York, tones of loneliness and indignation and patronizing concern, and a sound like hundreds of little eager paper feet jumping up and down. Oh God, now this really was the stuff of my nightmares. The words, a forest growing roots and sighing to each other about their months, no, years, neglect. Stop that, all of you. This was Engels, of course. You could hear the wire-rimmed glasses in his voice. Those years in the Paris library. I can't handle you right now either, Freddie. That's not... Never mind. What matters is you getting back to bed and feeding your brain something other than spreadsheets and percentages. What is this, tough love? You could call it that. Now, please, pick something. I gathered in a breath to feed another comeback, and in that instant I saw the orange stripes of the tiger, the stacked columns blocking me from the door, the rainbow of covers all around me, every one of them a door of its own. I was fighting this. Why, exactly? The tan volume sitting on my laptop was just the right bait when I slipped it into my hand. I read the title and nearly cackled out loud. Ooh, that's such a journey. I'm excited for you. I smiled at Angela and let the piles on the carpet shuffle out of my way as I headed back to my bedroom, where I stopped with my hand on the door. So, guys, could you... The sweep of my hand took in the rectangles littering the coffee table, the sofa, the floor. You heard her, comrades. Yet another reason to keep Carl around. I shut the door and listened to the faint sounds of paper organizing itself, in an order I was sure to be introduced to soon. After a second, I heard a soft knock at the door. It was Comfort Me with Apples, bearing a bowl of fruit and cheese. I thanked Ruth and settled back against the pillows and let myself be pulled inside the waiting pages of The Paper Menagerie. Thank you.
Cynthia Gómez, thank you so much. Those were lovely.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Boy, Laura, as usual, kind of an embarrassment of riches. Kate Heartfield, Cynthia Gómez, thank you both so much for joining us, and everybody out there once again for Story Hour. Really, really lovely work. So until next time, when we will have Joyce Reynolds Ward and Carlo Yeager Rodriguez. So please come on back. I want to thank both the wonderful authors tonight, my fabulous co-host, Laura Blackwell, Sipwa, for the Givers Grant, hopefully renewed in 2024, and all of you for just coming back week after week and sharing this wonderful work with us. So see you next time. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.